Okay, yeah, well, thank you very much, Andrea, for inviting me here today. I'm going to talk about digital travel a little bit, um, and it relates to some of the things that were mentioned, the sense of presence, of being in other places, of being in places at all. This is work I've done with my colleague Ingvar Chostheim, so you see his name there on the first screen. We've done this together. He's mostly responsible for the empirical results I'll mention in passing. Um, I don't have time to do too much detail, but I'll do the best I can. The presentation is my responsibility. So I wish I could be there with you in Milan. It feels very strange to be sitting in a little hut in the north of Sweden, but it's beautiful weather here, minus 12 degrees, and we'll see how this goes. If you have any questions, I guess it's only Andrea who can interrupt me, but do interrupt me or tell me if you can't hear me or if I'm going too fast or slow or running out of time, okay? It is a problem with digital travel or digital meetings to get the right feedback at the right time. Okay, I'll just put on then. Here's the outline for this morning. There are particularly four parts to this presentation. First of all, I want to consider the idea of digital travel. Why digital travel? Pretty obvious in a time like this that I would like to be in Milan, but I can't be because, I guess, of the pandemic and so on. I'll present a scenario and say a little bit about current status. Then I'll move on to issues of being in a place, in any place, and the sense of presence in a place. What happens when we meet in a place in no man's land that isn't really any place, which is where I feel myself to be now. Three, we'll look at some of our results from some findings of studies that Ingvar did. He was my PhD student at the time. He's now used a very nice thesis, and he's further on this topic and other topics relating to internet security and privacy. So I'll present very quickly some findings about how people respond to the idea of virtual sightseeing, and also what attitudes are to digital travel as compared to physical travel. And then the final part of the talk is about the future, some speculations, what we might do and how we might think about design for future digital travel. Okay, that's the outline. So, first of all, why digital travel? Well, at the moment we have this pandemic. A lot of people are not traveling who would otherwise have traveled. This is not all bad. I mean, it's nice to meet people physically, but it's not good for the environment. So another argument for not traveling physically, but traveling digitally, is to reduce pollution, fossil consumption, etc. Another important factor for me as an aging person, but also as someone who's has worked and is working with elderly people and their well-being, is that the persons like to travel and would like to travel, but the physicalities are more of a problem for them. If you're compared to a wheelchair, for example. And we've seen, thanks to the epidemic, largely, more and more meetings, what I call encounters here, taking place digitally. And in lots of ways, there are advantages. There are certainly economic advantages. So a lot of work that used to be done with physical meetings is done much more cheaply without physical meetings. So that's a good motivation for digital meetings, but how to make digital meetings better. So we meet in Zoom. Lots of people play computer games. I think people who don't play computer games don't realize A, how popular they are, and B, how very, very good they are, how very sophisticated, very realistic, very convincing, very engaging. So we have all that. We have realistic 3D environments where people feel that they are, even though they're not. And we don't make the most of that knowledge, I think, in implementing other forms of digital travel. And let's face it, many people are online, off and on perhaps, but during most of their waking day, most people, or many people, I would say, are somewhere else. So this is actually the century of digital travel, and that means we are not experientially where we are physically for a large part of our waking life. And this started at the beginning of the century, the 21st century, when people started to be on their mobile phones more and more and more. And so increasingly, we are somewhere else than where we are physically. So here's a scenario what a virtual vacation might be like. And this is one that's described where this link is. I'll send this link. It's at an old lady in Sweden called Ola. She's in her 80s. You can see her there in the center of the screen. She doesn't get out of the house much because of some disabilities. She has her medical appointments via computer. She's her friends sometimes via computer in chat rooms. She's got a nice computer system that her son Michael bought her, and she meets with him and her grandchildren digitally from her living room. So she doesn't get out a lot, but she gets out to a knitting circle and she has some particular friends there. In her youth, Ola liked to travel, and she's traveled over most of her lifetime on vacation. When she was a young woman, she studied in Valencia for 12 months. In fact, she was studying Spanish, so she speaks Spanish. She's quite fluent. She loves to travel. Ever since then, she had a Spanish boyfriend, but she married a Swede, and her and her husband often travel back to Valencia. They had their honeymoon there, and so it's a special place for her. So when she gets to be 85, her son, Michael, he bought her a virtual vacation from Virtual Vacation Inc. And what this includes is vivid experiences in virtual Valencia. So she travels to Valencia and she does the things she liked to do there, such as looking around the Museo del Artes and visiting cafes, parks, art galleries, walking around the old part of the town. She does this from her chair, which came with her computer setup. It's an interactive chair, so she can navigate by leaning forwards and backwards and sideways. And she can control her exploration of this virtual Valencia from the comfort of her own room. But she can also meet people. So when she goes to the art gallery, her friends from the knitting circle in their homes can join her in the art gallery, and they move around together and discuss the artifacts they find there. At the same time, her son and his family are having a vacation in the same place, but they don't do that much with Ola. Her son wanted to go scuba diving, so he's gone virtual scuba diving with a setup that measures his breathing in and out so that he can navigate up and down in the virtual water and see the coral reefs and the fish and the other animals. His children, they opted for road racing, so they're road racing around the streets of Valencia, while Ola is in the art gallery with her friends. And they all get together periodically, often in a virtual coffee bar or bar, and discuss their day. And at the end of 7 days of virtual vacationing every day with her family and friends, she finishes the package. She gets a complete digital record of everything she's done, and she has had an enjoyable experience that adds to her existing memory of Valencia. It builds on it and adds to it and enhances her happy memories of Valencia. Okay, that's the scenario. I hope you could take it in. If you can't, you can read it in this article that's shown the link. Just a second. Oh, that was a mistake. Sorry. Are you still seeing my screen?
Yeah, perfectly.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay. No, it's just I clicked something and it changed, but I've got it back now. Good. So what's the current status? That's the scenario of maybe 2 or 3 years in the future. What's the current status? Here's a list basically of what we have that I'm aware of in the area of virtual or digital travel. So we have things like Google Earth. Everybody's used it, I think. They look at the street their hotel is in. They look where the hotel is located. They move around and so on and so on. So if not a vacation, they use it for planning a vacation. There's flight simulator and other things like that. There's a huge number of immersive games that take you to other places. Some of them you share with other people. There are also many digital places you can visit on the web, as you probably know. There's pre-trials of actually going there, or there may be a self-contained visit to a beauty spot or a historical site or an art gallery. You can opt to travel on a train or walk around a city or fly in a plane over Los Angeles. Many of these are pre-recorded, but some of them are not. And we have vast numbers of webcams, free webcams you can look out through and see not very much is happening in most places at the time they're looking. But we can imagine how this could evolve into something more integrated. Also, through COVID, there's been a big expansion of watching and participating in real-time events at a distance, sports, plays, concerts, etc. I expect most of us have attended some of these events without actually being able to go there. There are some already existing virtual vacations, pre-packaged collections of things. They don't usually last days, they maybe last a couple of hours. But there isn't much in the way of integrating different activities or making it like a physical vacation. There's no developed attempt at a journey or to capture the psychology of travel. And we have meetings like this one, where we're all together in some place, but for some of us it feels like no place. That's a problem. No sense of space. We have digital encounters with other people. We gather together. And many years ago, Meyerowitz saw into the future that, in fact, we're losing the sense of place. And with place comes how to behave. So in Milan, there is a group of you all together in a room, and that determines and helps you know how to behave. So lots of things you don't do and some things you do because you know you're in a place, you're in a meeting, and that's what's happening. Another writer that's influenced us a lot is Lead. He wrote this excellent book, The Mind of the Traveler, which I recommend to everyone. And he discusses what it is to make a journey, and he talks about the 3 phases of departure, passage, arrival, and sometimes return. So he pointed out the roots of travel in travel that travel is hard work. It's dangerous, often or used to be. It involves the unexpected. These are things that we don't include in digital simulations of travel. When we take a real journey, we change place, but we also change ourselves. So that if you go to another city for a few months, you become a different person and a person that you wouldn't have been if you hadn't gone there. So how can we incorporate this kind of aspect, and should we? And when would we want to? Bailenson recently has made the news, popular press, with his series of Zoom fatigue. Basically, we suffer a lot of overload, or tend to, in digital meetings, partly because we feel stress. We don't know how to behave. We're too close to people sometimes when we have the camera on and we know we're being seen. We see ourselves on our screen, which we don't notice. Look in the mirror while we're doing things. We miss cues, we miss bodily cues, we miss breath being raised, we miss all kinds of things, intakes of breath, head movements. There may be lag, distorted sound, the video quite often freezes. It all ends up being a lot of work cognitively, and that means that, well, we get tired, and also don't remember what's happened quite so well as we would if it were a physical meeting. There are unrelated events that might distract us from what's happening in the virtual place. So I'm out in the shed in the garden so that I don't get interrupted by our 4 dogs, for example. I could have tried to take this meeting in the house, but I was afraid somebody comes to the door. My voice will be swamped by crazy dogs barking, so it can happen. Generally speaking, there's a lack of this sense of togetherness, no sense of place. We're in no man's land. We're floating in limbo. So a few words now about psychological presence in other places. This talk is based on a book which you can download for free. So anything I mentioned, you can look into in more detail by downloading this book, and I'll send you the link if you haven't got it already. In it, we consider the question of how can we be anywhere, really? Why do I feel like I'm in this shed that I'm in? And how can we be somewhere else then? So popular view is that we mentally represent the place we're in, and we try or act there, or we try to act there. And if we can't do things there, we start to doubt whether we're really there. The things that characterizes a dream is that you can't really do things. And then you wake up and think, this is a dream. A popular view is that the sense of being in a digital place through technology is a kind of perceptual illusion, the illusion of non-mediation. We know that for that to be effective, you need to feel as if you're in that place physically. So it's as if physical feeling that will give you the vivid sense of being somewhere else. And that's often looking in our, well, meetings, for example. And we need to be able to enact our intentions in that place. So if I want to do something in the room in Milan now, it's very difficult for me to do it. Somebody who's there could stand up and wave and, pull a funny face. I can't do that. Not that I want to, but anyway. Telepresence has been studied a lot. It's when we experience our being as being in another physical location. And when we do that, when we become fully immersed in another place, we believe in that world. It becomes real for us, at least for a while. If we reflect, we know it's not real. So if you're interacting in a game, very engaging game, part knows it's not real, but consciously and in the moment, you act and you have the feeling that it is real. So it becomes real for you. And virtual things can become real. Virtual things are real, often. We don't need to pretend they're real. We don't need to tell ourselves they're real. We can't help it. So we act instinctively and rapidly. It's a kind of type 2 instinctive actions in the moment, and that is presence. And we need to have elements of that, of course, not only that, but elements of that to give a sense of really being somewhere else. A sense of place, we looked at Ralph and some of literature and tourism and other fields that have considered why is it important to feel a sense of place, to become attached to a place, because that's another important aspect of physical travel. You become attached to certain places. I think I'm probably going to take longer than I should, so tell me if you really need me to shut up, Andrea.
No, no, please go ahead. It's very interesting.
Okay, good. That's all I need to hear. So quickly, some of our findings, really Ingvar's findings from his study for his PhD, firstly, and then secondly, we did a survey just last year. So that's two parts of two sets of results I want to briefly mention. One is about virtual sightseeing in Los Angeles. So Ingvar carried out several experiments that focused on sense of place, as reported by participants, and sense of presence. For sense of place, we used a model or a measure, an instrument derived from Ralph's model of placeness and enhanced it with some new categories. And for presence, we use the temple presence inventory to assess. The nice thing about that is it assesses presence on different aspects like perceptual realism, engagement, and so on. There are several different subcategories. And we also looked at the notion of affordances, which, as you will know, are things in the environment that people experience as inviting them to act or allowing them to act. The second study is about current attitudes or attitudes last summer to digital travel in light of the COVID situation. So virtual sightseeing in Los Angeles, one of the studies involved 60 participants. They were actually students, master students, and it was sightseeing in LA. That was the task. Have a look. People were given a task, and they were first of all trained and then allowed to do the task in this video game driving environment, Midnight Club LA, I think it was called. So they had subtasks and so on. I won't go into detail, but many participants reported a good sense of presence and of place, and we use these separate measures to assess those two. And one thing we found was that these two tend to co-vary. So the more, it's not surprising perhaps, but the more you feel present, the more you are likely to experience a sense of being in a place you might become attached to. And interestingly enough, perceptual realism and also a convincing narrative were determining factors for producing this effect. So it's not only about introduction or what you show people, it's about whether it's convincing and it fits a story that makes sense to the participant. Another thing I found that is quite interesting is that some people, quite a significant subgroup, reported sensory experiences, sensation, wasn't actually there in the simulation. Like they felt they'd touched things in the environment, they felt they'd picked up smell when they saw a hot dog stand. This is not a new finding. People have reported that in VR before, but it's interesting that this happened in what's essentially just a sightseeing game, a driving game, and that it also correlated with a sense of place and sense of presence. Perceptual realism scores also correlated with scores on affordance test. So not surprisingly, but what's important to see is that perception and action are intricately linked. So if you don't think you can act in a place, you're less likely to see it as being realistic perceptually. If you can act in there and you can move around and you can do things, then you're more likely to overlook shortcomings in the way things are rendered, for example. Okay, so people felt like they came to know LA as a destination. They got attached to some places. They felt like certain places were somewhere they could want to go back to, and so on. And so on. There's quite a lot more detail. You can find it in the book. The next study we did last summer was about Norwegian attitudes to digital travel. We have a market research company that finds responders for us, respondents. So I ended up with 206 participants for this one. It was done quite quickly, but they are a cross section of society, so all age groups and income groups and so on. And we studied their attitude to physical and digital travel and also to vaccinations. It was quite controversial at the time. So we found, well, as you'd expect, COVID increased the willingness to travel digitally. Generally speaking, digital travel is very popular. The people want to do it to see what it's like there, but not all wanted to do it instead of going there. Surprisingly, 68% said they would pay 10% of the cost of, say, traveling to a museum and looking at what's there. Even more surprisingly, we did find up to between 10 and 20% of people would accept digital travel as complete replacements. And some would pay up to 50%. I think that's as far as people would go in who were willing to pay for a digital substitute. Again, it depends what it is that's being replaced and, of course, what's being offered. But there is this group of people that we call digital travelers who are quite happy to stay at home and experience the world at large through their computers.
John,
okay, so
may I ask a question? May I ask a question? Can you
yes,
go back to the previous slide?
or the one before.
Yeah, thank you. So was the survey addressing a specific location, or it was just generic question whether people would be willing to pay for a digital travel? So in the survey, did you mention a specific location, or it was just a generic question?
It was a generic question, but we had like sub questions about what kind of place or what kind of event they would be willing to.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'm moving to the next part of the talk, which is about some innovations we're seeing in how people are trying to do digital or at a distance social encounters, meetings, and other social encounters. So one area we're seeing some growth in on some research is social telepresence robots and drones. I expect you've heard about the robots. It's been called teleconferencing on wheels. Basically, you have a meeting and one of the participants, like your missing student, is represented by a little robot, like those on the right, with a screen or an iPad or something. So they can see you, they can move around, you can see them, they can sit at different places around the table. You could add more or less facilities for them to intervene physically. Let me see. Yeah, and you can also, of course, because it's via the internet, you can give them the power to do things in the room, to turn the lighting up and down, or open and close motor doors, or so. Switch channels on a video projector. But for this to work, I mean, there's some evidence that this is, it's very nice, for example, if you want to attend a museum, perhaps with others, and it's all on one level, because these can't go up and down stairs very easily. They can use elevators though, but okay. Movement is limited, and you have to have the robot there. So if I want to visit you in Milan as a social telepresence robot, or through one, you have to have a robot there for me to appear through and as. Another more recent one is to talk about drones. This seems to be a popular research topic right now, or speculation topic. So instead of a robot, you have a drone, teleconferencing on wings. One can go up and down stairs. It can fly through open doors and windows. Doesn't look much like you though, but and how do you control this thing? It was going to require a lot of attention from you, the operator, the visitor, going to be quite dangerous, because I don't want a drone flying in my face during a meeting. But then the latest development is, of course, that AI will solve that. So the drone has a lot of intelligence, and you just need to give it high-level commands, and it won't crash into people and so on. But as little is known about the impact of having a drone in a meeting, they're also a bit noisy. Anyway, another class of innovation is the other way. I mean, the first class that I just described is about the technology being in the physical place. This is more about the human being completely separated from the physical place. So at least this one. Immersive VR, you all know about. This gives the strongest possible sense of presence. You see me there in the top right picture, wearing an exoskeleton and a head-mounted display. And I can lift enormous weights because of the exoskeleton, and I can look down and admire my muscled body flex as I do so. And I can go to do this anywhere. I mean, I can have the impression that I'm in a bodybuilding class somewhere and impressing everyone with what I can do or something. So great presence, very convincing, and people respond emotionally as if they were really somewhere else. But there are limitations, of course. You can't use this while you're traveling to work on the train, which is what people want to do. They want to be able to do things from anywhere. So you would have digital travel centers where you go in, put on the equipment. These may already exist as far as I know. And then you could combine this with a virtual vacation, or you could have a robot in a place or a drone, and you control it through the interactive technology you're wearing. Another one that people talk a lot about, including Zuckerberg, is the holograms. So we can do this. We can have quite realistic life-size presence of other people. I could be there with you in Milan now as a hologram, but you would have to have special equipment, and I would have to have special equipment. So it's really a kind of specialized equipment, booth to booth interaction. It's not going to be that convenient for most people to invest in this kind of technology, I think. So what are the opportunities and challenges we face then in trying to produce accessible and enjoyable digital travel and digital meetings? It's a broad class, the way I see digital travel. It's vacations and it's also meetings on the other end. Clearly, UX design and innovation are the keys to successful digital travel. We already have the technology to do a lot of very interesting things in video games, in robotics, in VR, you name it, we can do it. We have the connectivity and we have the technology. But what we don't know is how to put it together in good experiences. So there are two approaches that I see that I want to stress. You can see them as complementary or contradictory. One is to make digital travel more like physical travel. The other is to blend what you need to be here with what you need to be there. So when you're traveling on a commuter train to work, you might want to be somewhere else for a while, but you don't want to be completely closed off from where you actually are physically. So with the first one, we can make digital travel more like physical travel, as in that scenario. It's ambitious, though. It's quite a lot of work, and it's also limiting because technology can do a lot more than what we can do physically. That's why we use it. So it can do instant searches of vast numbers of places. We can be teleported somewhere else instantly. We can do all kinds of things that we couldn't do physically. So it's both ambitious and limiting. To try and blend the requirements of being there with being here, what would it involve? I think at least some kind of adjustable presence where I can opt to be more or less involved in one place or the other. and we need some more metaphors than we have for thinking about. I've been talking just about meetings and travel, basically, but there are other ways of thinking about how to be somewhere you aren't attentionally, at least for part of the time. So in the book, we consider these a bit, and one thing we focus on is designing with blends. I don't know if you've come across this yet, but you probably will. It's clear that you can blend two kinds of conceptual space and come up with something that come up with a lot of different possibilities for what you might implement as a design. So this is a very sketchy view of my PC as a desktop. So it's based on a metaphor. You come up with a metaphor, you identify 2 or 3 or more input spaces from the metaphor. So on the one side, the PC, on the other, the desktop, and you choose some of the features of each, and you end up with a blend, and then you explore whether it could work and what it would be good for. You can be guided by a theme like pleasure, entertainment, excitement, privacy. Okay, I won't go too much detail, but here is some of the things you might think of for to use my device is to be a traveler. So input space 1 is the technical features. Input space 2 is travel, aspects of travel. Input space 3 is embodiment, and you would put those together and choose some of them, and you end up with a blended conceptual space that may be of some use for thinking about digital in a new way. That's too brief to make much sense, but anyway. For other metaphors I can think of, I'm sure you can think of many more. Metaphors are a good place to start. Then you see what would possibilities can come out of that, and they're almost endless different input spaces, and then you put them together in any number of ways and see where that takes you. So a video conference is a short visit. Browsing is travel. My phone is my home. My computer is a vehicle. Internet is an adventure. I be home when I turn on my device, and then I come back later. So the home away metaphor. When I visit a digital place, I'm inside and outside at the same time. Inside and outside of that place. Okay, I'm going to conclude with that rather vague mention of future possibilities and approaches. I think it's clear that digital travel of some form or another is going to proliferate in the future. We're going to see more and more of it. We want to produce memorable travel experiences, and we're going to need better ways of meeting digitally. And I think we can go a long way by applying what is already known in tourism about making a successful vacation, applying what we already know from gaming, that we need engaging events and a good story, perhaps providing adaptive degrees of presence and placeness, to give it's convincing as if physically being somewhere I'm not physically, and being able to carry out your intentions effortlessly in a digital space is key to acceptance of new applications, in my view. And there are going to be novel approaches that haven't even been identified. Should I go there, or does there come to me? Where is there? Where am I? Whatever, acceptance is going to depend on the quality of the experience. So UX designers and researchers will be key players in this.
Thank you, John. Excellent. Thank you.
And this link and links and I was going to say something else.
Thank you.
Just a second. I want to send the presentation. Yes.
Is the book open access, or it can be purchased online as a digital ebook?
It's open access as a digital ebook.
Oh, great! That's amazing news. So you can download the
Yeah.
book. So open access. And thank
Free
you,
for
John.
all, so I'm not selling anything. Yes.
Sorry. Before taking questions, I would like to thank you again for this amazing and really interesting presentation. I think that your keynote has really three merits also for this opening. First, um, it addresses the key topic of this master edition, which is digital travel. So is perfectly on topic. Second, because it shows the importance of user experience research, of user research when exploring potential new markets. So at the first glance, if you ask someone, would you like to go to Venice virtually and pay for this travel? Maybe you would expect that this person says, no, I don't want to make a digital travel. I want to make a real travel. But then, if you really do this type of research seriously, you discover some interesting things, unexpected things. So, for example, 68% of respondents they said that they were willing to pay 10% of the cost of a conventional travel to make a digital travel. So this is a powerful insight and shows how much important is user research when defining a new use case, when defining a new market opportunity. And the third reason why I really loved your presentation, John, is that it's really timely. We are on the verge of the emergence of the metaverse, and the idea of virtual travels is, of course, really central to the development of the metaverse. Of course, some of us is really, scared about the idea of the metaverse because there are some dystopic perspectives on this emerging technology. But on the other hand, it's really important to uh, carry out good psychological and design research in order to understand what is feasible in the metaverse, what is meaningful. And for this reason, I think that your presentation clearly shows that the only way of addressing this complex question is to attack it from two different perspectives, the perspective of design, the perspective of psychology. You mentioned presence, which is a key psychological concept we're addressing, virtual travel. So thank you again for this brilliant presentation. Now, I would like to take a couple of questions from the audience, if you have more time. Any question? In the back? Sorry, just 1 second, John. We are bringing the mic to. Please say your name also. Thank you.
Hi, John. I'm Nazario.
Hello.
One thing for me, one really important when I travel, is the smell. Do you think how to deal with the lack of the smell in the digital travels?
Yeah.
You got a question, John?
Yeah, I got a question. Smell, right?
Yeah.
One thing we found is that if you stimulate the other senses, people, as it were, will add the smell. So we did find that some people thought they could smell Los Angeles after, in parts of the game, they were when they look back on the game they'd played. So yes, of course, smell's a problem. People have tried to come up with ways of reproducing smells at a distance. At the moment, it's not been solved in an acceptable way. Smells tend to linger. They tend to hang around longer than you want to because, of course, perception of smells is based on physical molecules attaching themselves to sites in your olfactory apparatus, so you can't get rid of it that quickly. So I think there are limitations. There's also limitations about touch, because to reproduce convincing physical touch, you need to reproduce real forces, and that involves a lot of technology, equipment to exert force, because we can't magically exert force at a distance. We can magically, as it were, show pictures and send sound, because these are vibrations in wavelengths. They're not physical. So no, there's a problem with smell. But as I say, you might be surprised that if an experience is convincing as another place, people will add smell, because what we perceive is not only what's there; it's what we expect to be there.
Thank you.
Answer your question.
Next question.
Hello, John. My name is Pilin. So my question is, when you ask the persons who is attending the survey that they can pay 10 euros, etc., did you consider about something similar to blockchain? Because metaverse is connected to blockchain when they're taking their pricing. So is this question is basically for paying normal payment via any kind of server, or it was about blockchain and Bitcoin system or NFT?
Last question.
Well, I think that would be a nice way to go, but it wasn't part of our survey. We didn't specify how they were paying, so I can't say more about that. Okay.
Thank you. Next question. There was a question in the back, or no? There is first this. Yep. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Ledin. Thank you for the presentation first. And I was wondering if there were any common qualities among those people who experience the virtual world more richly, I guess, like those who reported a sense of smell or touch, or those who preferred the virtual experience to the in-person one. Like, do they play more video games? Do they read more fiction? Do they just report having a more rich imagination? Like, is that a predisposition that they have, or is that a skill that we can practice and learn? And what's your take on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Very good. Very difficult to answer, I think. We didn't in the experiment. We didn't identify or try to identify characteristics of the people who report other modalities. We identified that it correlated with some other factors, though, such as perceived perceptual realism and engagement. I mean, there's other work on the extent to which people are, what different personality types, for example, are likely to feel present. There's nothing very strong that I know about, but a general ability to be engaged by certain things. I don't know. I'd expect introverts would be more likely to be engaged in some situations, but I don't actually think there's a strong link between particular psychological types and these kind of experiences. I think more or less we all react in the same way in the same way that we more or less react to the same physical environments. I mean, some people are more neurotic, some people are more likely to respond strongly than others to any situation. So I think what's true in VR is true in physicality, or the other way around. That doesn't really answer your question.
You. There is time for a last question, quick question, please, and hopefully also quick answer. Sorry, John, but we are running out of time. Last question was from in. Oh no, it's fine. Okay, John, thank you very much. It was really the best way to start our journey Really very interesting presentation. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
We are having a coffee break now, so thank you again, and greetings to Eva. Ciao. Okay, so it's time for coffee break now. We are 10 minutes late, so could you please have a 10 minutes coffee break instead of 15? So we can spare 5 minutes, and we meet about, yeah, 11:35, 20 to 12. Okay, thank you.